welcome back. You can totally tell that our readings are picked at random out of a hat because I noticed that you haven't actually heard some of those ones yet. On with the show. Don't forget, if you hear anything that might be quote of your night, do drop them in the chat. And hashtag VNatB for tonight, please, folks. Okay, are you drum rolling? I do hope so. It's S.J. Watson. S.J. Watson is the author of bestsellers Before I Go to Sleep, Second Life, and Final Cut. Despite one of these being made into a film with Nicole Kidman, woo! The achievement S.J. is most proud of is that he's been an answer on Pointless. Having never watched the show, he's not sure if that's a good or a bad thing. Thank you for joining us. Welcome, everyone. S.J. Watson.
Thank you, Vic. I have just, in the last 20 minutes, changed my mind about what I'm going to read. I was going to read from my latest novel, Final Cut, but I've changed my mind. I'm going to read from a short story that features in this book, which is called First Edition, and it's a selection of short stories written to honour the 21st birthday of Goldsborough Books, which is a bookshop that is in London, and many crime and thriller fiction readers will know about. So I hope this isn't a bit too much like Radiohead decided not to do the single but doing an obscure B-side, but here we go. This is the first half of a short story called Mule Deer. Scott sat next to his father with the woman opposite. His mouth watered. A plate of steak steamed on the table between them, and next to it fizzed a freshly poured beer. Scott had a cola as usual, but this time it was different. There was a fourth person. Next to the woman, across from Scott, with a cherry sundae in front of her. A girl. At first, he'd pretended not to notice her. She had ribbons tied in her hair and frills fringing her ankles, and looked about 8 years old. Same age as him, more or less. She sat neatly, her limbs arranged just so. She was watching his father intently, her head tilted slightly to one side at the exact same angle as her mother's. They both had their mouths slightly open, as if they were about to speak. They both looked like they were waiting for their cue. It won't come in a hurry, thought Scott. His father had barely warmed up. He was telling the story of the time he'd shot a deer. It was a mule, he was saying, way out near Cobble Creek. The woman nodded. She knew where that was, but his father didn't notice. Colorado, he said. It's a golf resort, isn't it? She said, Cobble Creek. His father cleared his throat. He didn't care either way. We stayed there, he said, but we were headed out for rifle. Good hunting there. I really wanted to bag something big, elk or something, but his father shrugged. Not his fault. But, said the woman. She'd said her name was Mandy. Scott hadn't caught the daughter's name. Casey, something like that. But it wasn't to be, said his father. Still, got me a mule. Mandy leaned forward. She rested her chin on her hand. Her nails were painted red. They were longer than his mother's. They looked sharp. He imagined they were talons, that she was a bird of prey or a pterodactyl. That sounds amazing, she said. Oh, it was nothing much, said his father. I've shot things since, bigger things. He saw his father's glance. Say one fucking word, it said, and I'll kill you. It's just that this was the first time. What was it like? Said Mandy. Casey leaned forward too, though she couldn't quite balance her elbows on the table. His father began to speak. The guys wanted to shoot from a tower, but not me. Spot and stalk for me. Mandy nodded. So did Casey. They were rapt. Scott couldn't help but suppress a grin. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, they were getting the full-on bullshit. He was surprised. He thought his father fancied his chances with this one, yet here he was, doing his best to piss her off completely. Every time, his father said. Why climb up a tree and shoot? I want the thrill of the chase. That's real hunting. Sit up, Scott. He did as he was told. Casey looked at him then. It was as if it was the first time she'd noticed him, even though he'd been sat there the whole time. He held her gaze, tried to communicate with her just using the power of his mind. This is horse crap, he wanted to say. Thrill of the chase. He sat in the back of a 4x4 and shot at anything he was told to. He missed everything. A couple of the guys started calling him Boss-Eyed Pete, even though that wasn't even his name. The thing with deer, his father said, is to try and get a one-shot. Kill with one bullet. Mandy was nodding her head. His father went on. Can't have a wounded deer spooking the others. So, he stretched out his arm, you have to draw a line. He touched Mandy's face just below her eye. From here, he said, He took his hand away, then touched her beneath her other eye. To hear. She didn't blink. She didn't close her eyes. She just kept looking at his father. It was creepy. And, she said, it came out as a whisper, almost breathless. He smiled, exposing his 2 white teeth. And, he said, draw that line. He was speaking slowly. He closed his eyes, aim a couple of inches above it. He pulled his hand back, folded his ring and little fingers in and extended the rest so it looked like a pistol. He put the tip of his fingers in the middle of Mandy's brow, right between her eyes. Dead center, he said, and then he drew a long breath, filled his lungs, and without warning raised his voice. Bam, he said, and they all jumped, Mandy especially. She gasped, then she laughed. She looked uncomfortable. Bullet in the brain, he said. He looked deadly serious. His hand was still pointing at her forehead. Mandy stopped laughing. She swallowed. That's the best way. Instant kill. Drops the animal straight away. Dead in a second. None of them breathed. Casey's ice cream puddled in the bottom of her sundae glass. On the other side of the restaurant, some kid was crying. The daughter had been an unexpected hiccup, he thought, but so far it was all going to plan. Is that what you did? Said Mandy. His father waited for a long moment, then pulled his hand away. He picked up his fork, skewered some of his bloody steak. He put it in his mouth and began to chew. I wish, he said. He was still chewing as he spoke. Scott could see the mashed meat in his mouth, the blood stains on his teeth. Not many can do that, you know, unless you hunt at night, infrared, night scope. So they can't see you. Precisely. You can get real close then. Much more of a chance of a clean one-shot kill. But this was middle of the day. Exposed, could have been messy. Too low and you hit the nose, too high and you're over its head. Either way, you have a spooked deer. I went for the shoulder. The shoulder? Get it right and you hit the spine. That's one deer that ain't going to move again. But does it die quickly? His father put down his knife. Depends, he said. On, said Mandy. But his father was looking over towards the kitchens. One of the waitresses was bending over, getting a cola from the fridge by the counter. Her skirt was stretched tight. He knew his father was looking at her ass, at the inch or so of skin that was exposed as her blouse rode up. He knew he was imagining kneeling in front of her, sliding her black skirt down and letting her step out of it, sliding his hands up her thighs before nuzzling into her crotch. The bitches loved that, he'd once said to him. So what does it depend on? Mandy said again. His father looked back at her. He smiled. Let's talk about something else, he said. What about you? Tell me, beautiful. What about you? Thank you very much. Back to Vic.
Thank you so much for that. That was brilliant. I love it when people go rogue and do something different. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so I mean, I was going to nominate Bitches Love That as one of the quotes, but you guys can nominate. Drumroll, please. It is Awais Khan. To be an author in a country like Pakistan is never easy, but Awais Khan was born for such challenges. You sure were, Awais. He's the author of No Honour and In the Company of Strangers, and when he's not writing, he's either reading, working, or fighting the rampant book piracy in Pakistan. Good for you, Awais, and thank you for doing that. We are delighted to have you here in the virtual bar this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Vic and Simon, both of you. Thank you so much for having me here. And usually I'm joining from Pakistan, but today I'm joining from London. So that deserves a woo, you know, if there ever was one. So it's really nice to be here in London after 2 years, and I'm really glad to be doing this. So I'm going to be reading from my book, No Honour, which came out last year. I just wanted to crack a joke first because the reading material is a bit grim. So this is from the prologue where an honor killing is happening in Pakistan, a rural village in Pakistan. So that's where I'm reading from. And it's about a woman a young girl who is not married and who has had a child. And it's about her interaction with her brother and the village on a whole. So here we go. And now here she was at age 16 with a fiancé she hadn't seen since that day and a newborn baby ripped from her arms. All he wanted was your virginity, Aslam said. Don't fool yourself by thinking it was love. It wasn't even lust. These city boys are all the same, Peer Saab says. They come prancing in with sweet gifts and try to buy our daughter's innocence. And you spread your legs for him at the first opportunity. Her mother slapped her palms against her forehead. Hi, Why did this happen to us? Because you gave birth to a Kanjri, that's why. A Kanjri who sold her honor for a few gifts. Shabnam didn't have the energy to argue with them. Her ears were trained towards the door. She could hear raised voices outside. Men's voices. Her mother shuddered as if something had blocked her windpipe. They're here, she whispered to her son, her voice choked with fear. Quick, open the door, or they'll burn the house down. Try to talk them out of it. Aslam smirked. Gladly. Aslam, no. Shabnam raised herself to her feet. The room spun in front of her and she almost lost her balance. Give me the baby, please. I promise I'll leave and never come back. Aslam scratched his chin. What puzzles me is how you managed to hide your fat belly for so long. But then you've always been lazy. It was no real surprise to see you gaining more weight. His eyes darkened and he directed his gaze at their mother. Did you know? Their mother put a hand on her heart. Of course not. What do you take me for? She had known for months, of course, and had said nothing, hoping against hope that the man would return. When seven moons had passed since Shabnam's last blood, her mother had thrust a pouch at her containing her life savings and some jewelry and pleaded with her to run away. By then, it was too late. There were rumors of gangs of rapists prowling the neighboring villages. Every day they heard of women being kidnapped and raped. Even if her mother had accompanied her, they wouldn't have been safe. These men had known to rape women in their 70s, and there was no way she would have put her mother through something like that. Shabnam decided to face her fate. She wasn't going to run away. Now she wished she had. What a fool she had been to think her brother would support her. As the knocking became urgent pounding, she turned to her brother again. I'm her mother, she said. Have you no heart? When he looked away, she tried the only thing she knew that would get a response out of him. She took a hold of his free hand and held it on her breast where the milk welled. See, can't you see? She needs me. Aslam sprang away from her as if he'd been electrocuted. What kind of Kanjri would try to seduce her own brother? Shabnam wanted to slap him across the face. Anything to make him understand, but he held that precious bundle in his arms. Every thud on the door intensified the beat of her heart till she felt she would collapse. She leaned against the wall for support. The room was thick with the smell of blood. The coppery taste of it clung to her mouth. Time was running out. As soon as Aslam opened the door, everything happened quickly. Her baby was shoved into the hands of a stranger, and Aslam, with a couple of other men, dragged Shabnam out of the house. Day was breaking, and there was a nip in the air. She felt it on her exposed arms as she was pulled towards the village square. She was so weak that her vision was clouded, and she caught only glimpses of the crowd of people who had gathered in the village square. It was only when they brought her face to face with the Pir that she saw the smile on his face, his hands folded over his belly. Take her to the riverbank, he said mildly. The cold morning air seemed to settle around her heart. Just beyond the row of thatched houses was a clearing by the river where the villagers often congregated for festivals. At this time of the year, the water would not be frigid, but it wouldn't be warm either. Courage, she whispered to herself, for my baby. A few of the older women spat at her as she was led down the road, the mud clumping around her ankles. Children threw dirt in her eyes, pulled at her hair. Haramal, they called her baby, born outside marriage, shame. Filthy Kanjri, Shabnam, burn her alive, shoot her, drown her. Her brother smiled all through the procession, the beads of sweat on his forehead the only proof of his anger. Shooting her would be too easy, he replied to a man paying for her blood. She needs to understand what she's done, and I need to restore my family's honor. Hear, hear, the crowd cheered. There's a man who knows what he has to do. The jeers continued all the way to the clearing. It may have been a carnival ground with the three priests cut back and packed earth beneath their feet, but this place carried a hint of foreboding even at the best of times. Shabnam knew full well how many women had been tortured here. The current must be strong, as she could already hear the water. Shabnam pleaded with Aslam with her eyes. She didn't have the energy to open her mouth. She pleaded for her baby. She knew she would die, but at least her baby could live, a part of her. Her brother seemed to read her mind. He held up a hand to silence the crowd. First, he removed the rag that wrapped the baby. Bring a bucket of milk. No, she thought. You wouldn't dare. She didn't think she had the energy to speak, but when they lowered her child into the bucket, she wailed. The little one's cries died as soon as she vanished into the bucket, but Shabnam couldn't stop screaming. The milk sloshed over the edge, splashing onto the bare earth. Small bubbles rose to the surface, but soon the ripples settled. Good riddance, the Pir said. We must never let such filth tarnish our village. The baby was born out of wedlock, an abomination on this earth. Good work, my son. Aslam grinned, and for a moment he looked like a 16-year-old boy that he was, and not the demon he had just become. Shabnam hardly felt the breath leave her body as she was thrown into the river. She embraced the coolness of the water and let it pull her down, away from the madness and pain. Peace at last. Over to you, Vic. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Awais. It was really, really powerful and moving. I hope you enjoy the rest of your time in London too.
Thank you. I'm sure I will.
Thank you for joining us. Right. Drum roll, please, folks. My next trick, I'm going to pull Neil Lancaster's name out of the hat. Neil Lancaster is the author of the Tom Novak and Max Craigie series of books. When he's not writing, Neil is shockingly lazy and mostly looks out of the window at the nice view, as well as messing about with Peggy the Cockapoo. That sounds really lovely. When he actually starts writing, he can knock out 2 books a year, which is a miracle because the view is absolutely splendid. Neil's latest book, The Blood Tide, is released in hardback on the 31st of March, which is next Thursday. Just doing some maths there. But he has a lovely copy waiting for one lucky winner tonight. Neil, thank you for joining us.
It's very much my pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for having me. I'm very honoured to be in the company I'm in tonight. As Vic said, Blood Tide is the book that is out next week. It's the second of the Craigie series, and it's my 5th book. So I'm going to read you a little bit of that tonight. But first, before I do, can we all admire my T-shirt, please? This is a message we can all get behind, I hope. But anyway, The Blood Tide, which starts off with when a fisherman goes missing on Loch Torridon, which is a little bit north of where I live here on the Black Isle. And it starts off, a small town mystery that starts off to be something a great deal more. So I'll read a little bit of that and hopefully give you a little bit of a flavour. Now, if there's any people from Scotland listening to this, I'm going to have to try and do just some little bits of Scottish accents, which is A, embarrassing, and B, might get me murdered. So I need to be a bit careful, but I'll do my best, okay? So anyway, here we go. His task was childishly... I tell you what, before I read this is the sort of thing I do. I need to explain that, because I'm not starting straight from chapter 1, and that might not make sense. So I'm cutting in a little bit just to cut down on the time. And what's happening is a chap called Jimmy McLeish is a fisherman who lives up by Torridon. He normally fishes for lobster and fish, but at the moment he has something completely different in his rib, which he is taking ashore now. His task was childishly simple, so he really shouldn't have been this nervous. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his battered hip flask. His hand shook as he unscrewed the cap and took a hefty nip of the peaty whiskey, enjoying the warmth as it slid down his throat. The torch flashed again 3 times as he killed the engine and nosed the boat to the shore, close enough to the launch trailer. There was a soft bump as the rib came to a halt on the stony sand, and he flipped the goggles up in their harness. The sudden silence was absolute. He looked at the shore but saw nothing in the blackness. There was no one there. He waited, nestling his night vision goggles down to scan the area. The scenery once again bathed in the soft green light. The beads of sweat on his forehead made the rubber eyepiece feel greasy and slick. He'd seen the flashes from the shore. He was certain of it. So where the hell was Macca? He jumped off the small boat and into the shallows and pulled the rib ashore, feeling the gravelly surface grip the keel. He quickly jammed a stake into the ground and lashed a line to it. He looked again at the new vehicle, which was dark and foreboding as the landscape that surrounded them. As he adjusted the intensifying properties of the goggles, hoping to see something, the landscape gradually lightened. His eyes followed the loch shore towards Torridon, where his wife would be sitting at home in front of the fire. And more than ever, he regretted the blazing row they'd had before he left. As always, it was about money, or the lack of it. He'd stormed out, giving her no indication of where he was going or what he was doing. He hoped that enough cash to pay the outstanding bills and maybe get a nice meal would soften her up. Part of him, though, wished now that he could be with her, right there, right now, rather than in the inky blackness, waiting for the distinctly intimidating Macca. Not for the first time, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Suddenly, a blinding burst of torchlight shone directly into him, immediately overwhelming the image-intensifying properties of the goggles. He gasped and pulled them away from his face. Stars danced in front of the eyes. As the sudden assault on his senses, he blinked rapidly, rubbed his eyes, but the flare remained. When he opened them, he was once again flooded with bright light from a head torch worn by a huge man. This wasn't the short, stocky Macca. "Jesus, you almost blinded me," Jimmy said. "Who the hell are you? I was expecting Macca." "I'm Davy, and this is Callum. Scully sent us. You got the bag?" The man was tall and muscular, with a pale face and dark hair. His accent was pure Glasgow, and there was something about it that Jimmy didn't like. The torchlight only partially lit the man's face, giving it a ghostly, unpleasant quality. Jimmy's thoughts flashed briefly at the times his brother would scare him by holding a torch underneath his face. He felt a prickle of fear begin to grip in his gut. It didn't feel right. "Aye, it's here, but you got my money." "Of course we have, but we need to see the package first," said Davy with a smirk. "But Scully said cash on delivery." His voice was faltering and unsure where this was going. "Cash on delivery? You hear this? Manny here wants paying before we've even seen what's in the bag." The man called Callum stepped forward. He was a full head shorter than Davy and much slimmer. Although it was hard to see him properly, the only light sources being Davy's head torch and what looked like a pen light in Callum's hand. "Oh dear, my friend. Is this your first time?" said Callum. "No one gets paid before we check the bag, right? And do be a sport and pass it all over, and then we can get your rib out of the water pronto. I know this is a bit of a backwater, but the local constabulary may venture here. Now come along. Chop, chop." And over to you, Vic.
Thank you very much for that. That was brilliant. Thank you. We have one more reading before it's break time again. Gosh, where does the time go? So get those drums out, please. It is Abir Mukherjee. Abir Mukherjee is the author of the Wyndham and Banerjee series of crime novels set in colonial-era India. His books have been translated into 15 languages and have won various awards, including the CWA Dagger for Best Historical Novel and the Prix du Polar Européen. He co-hosts the Red Hot Chili Writers podcast, which takes a wry look at the books, writing and the creative arts. We are delighted to have you here, Abir. Thank you so much for joining us.
I don't know, I'm still in shock after Neil's Glaswegian accent. I'm sorry, I almost switched off at that point. That was a travesty, Neil, but the reading was fantastic. The Glaswegian accent's going to get you killed, mate. Okay, well, I should talk about me. So I am the author of the Wyndham and Banerjee novels, which are set in colonial India, and I'm going to do a reading from the latest in the series, which is called The Shadows of Men. I'd show you the cover, but it's fallen off. I don't know where it's gone. I've got more copies, but they're in the attic, and I might break my neck going up there, so I'm not going to. I'm going to read from round about the beginning, a couple of chapters in. In this chapter, Surin has been tasked by Lord Taggart, who is the Chief Commissioner of Police, to tail a man, but he's made a dog's breakfast of it, and he's found himself arrested. And Sam has to go and get him out of prison in the middle of the night. So here we go. I'll be speaking for Sam, but there's some of Surin's dialogue in there as well. So my Indian accent will hopefully be better than Neil's Glaswegian accent, but I'm not making any promises. I could get into a lot of trouble. Okay, here we go. The suburb of Budge Budge was about as picturesque as a frontline trench, and for a policeman, almost as dangerous. Not for the first time was I grateful for a fast car, a diligent driver, and the cover of darkness. As the Wolseley sped past derelict mills and hollowed-out wharves, I wondered just what it was Surin thought he was doing, hanging around in a place like this, and rather more importantly, why he'd felt the need to get himself arrested for killing someone. The police station was a beleaguered-looking redoubt, the shutters over its barred windows scorched and pitted, and the wood of its doors cladded with and stiffened with iron. The car pulled up, and I got out to the sound of glass crackling in the dirt beneath my boot. The streets seemed deserted, save for a grizzled pie dog who sat in front of the station, gnawing on the shin bone of some beast that probably didn't need it anymore, and who growled defensively as I passed. The doors were shut fast, which made sense. There was probably little point in reinforcing the damn things if you left them wide open. And anyway, this didn't look like the sort of neighbourhood where the locals made a habit of popping into the station to hand in a lost wallet. I rapped on them with the side of my fist, then called out in English, having found long ago that in India, the judicious deployment of the English language often helped speed up people and processes that would otherwise take far longer. Sure enough, the cover of a spy hole shot back like a rifle bolt, and I was appraised by a yellowing eyeball. I looked over to my driver, Shiva. Not being overly keen on him waiting alone outside like a sitting duck, I called for him to join me, but he shook his head. I should have expected that. He loved that car as much as he loved his own family. It was only as the bolts slid back and I crossed the threshold into the fortress-like Thana that I realised there may have been another reason for his reticence. If the worst did happen and we were suddenly attacked by a mob, having the car meant he'd at least have a decent chance of escape. As for me, I'd be stuck in the station with the constables, ready to be roasted like chickens. The copper who'd opened the door attempted a salute that petered out halfway to his head, his expression somewhere between wary and world-weary. I knew how he felt. It was late and I was too tired for pleasantries, so I got to the point. "Where is he?" The constable gestured with a nod. "Please follow me, sir." There wasn't much to the place, just a room where a few more constables slouched indolently against bare walls, a small office with its door ajar, and a corridor leading to the cells. If there was electricity, someone had cut the supply, because the place was illuminated solely by the flickering light of a hurricane lamp, and the air smelled of kerosene and piss. Surin, dressed in a soot-smeared and blood-stained shirt, sat on a bench behind the iron bars of a cement cell. His face bore the scars that went with what was known in the trade as a rigorous arrest, a burst lip and one eye swollen shut. The other, though, seemed surprised to see me. I rattled the bars of his cell and yelled out at a constable who sat warming a desk a foot away. "Open this bloody door!" The man rose quickly, hurried over, and in a metallic flurry pulled out a ring of keys. "What the hell, Surin?" I said. The sergeant staggered to his feet. "It's not what—" I cut him off with a gesture, waited for the constable to unlock the door, then ordered him and his colleague to wait outside with the other officers. Once they'd gone, I directed Surin to retake his seat. "What happened to your face?" He raised a hand to a purple cheek. "A slight disagreement with the constables who detained me." Lucky it was only slight," I said. "Any more serious than they might have killed you. What did you do?" Surin sat down but remained resolutely mute on the matter. I ran a hand through my hair. "They're saying you killed a man, then set fire to his house." He looked up and stared at me with his good eye. "I did not kill him." The denial was wholehearted, but it was still only half a disavowal. "And the building? You didn't try to torch that?" Surin paused. "No. I mean, yes, I may have set it alight, but not to—" His voice tailed off into a sigh. "It is most difficult to explain." "Well, you better find a way," I said. "You're up on charges of murder, arson, and resisting arrest. More than enough to see your neck in a noose." Surin shook his head. "They can't hang me," he said with a degree of certainty which the circumstances hardly seemed to warrant. "They most certainly can," I said. "Now tell me what happened so I can sort this out." A bead of sweat trickled down from his temple. He shook his head. "I cannot, but it is imperative that I speak to Lord Taggart. You must get a message to him." "Why?" I asked. "Because the dead man in that building, it was Prashant Mukherjee." The name hit me like a kick from a mule. Mukherjee was a prize ass, the sort of pompous, pontificating high-caste Hindu that made me understand just why so many lower-caste Bengalis had converted to other religions. But to a certain sort of Hindu, mainly the upper caste down on his luck variety that blamed all their problems on foreign invaders and Muslim usurpers, Mukherjee was a folk hero, the soft-spoken Hindu high priest who provided the intellectual veneer to justify all manner of thuggery from his hardline co-religionists. Bloody hell, Suran, I said. Of all the people whose murders you could get yourself mixed up in, you chose Prashant Mukherjee. It was hardly a choice, he said. What am I supposed to do now? I told Udam Singh that I'd find you and that we'd meet him in half an hour's time to discuss his boy. We stand him up and he'll put a price on your head. Udam Singh will have to wait, he said. The priority is to speak to Lord Taggart. Without him, I'm dead already. Back to you, Vic.
That was brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it was a delight to host you. Okay, folks, so we are going to another break, but don't forget to wait until you've heard all the readings to request your books. And also, please make note, it's a different email address today. It's vnatb20@gmail.com, just so you know. We will see you in a couple of minutes. Thank you.
I knew a man, Bold Jangles, and he danced for you in his worn-out shoes, silver hair and ragged shirt and baggy pants. He would do the old soft shoe. He would jump so high, then he'd lightly touchdown. He told me of the time he worked with minstrel shows, traveling throughout the South. Spoke with tears of 15 years, how his dog and he, they would travel all about. But his dog up and died, got up and died. And after 15 years, he still breathed. He said, I mostly dance now in these honky-tonks for my drinks and tips. But most of the time I spend behind these county bars. You see, son, I drinks a bit. Then he shook his head. Whoa, whoa, and he shook his head. I can swear I heard somebody say, please, please. Mr. Bojangles, call him Mr. Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles, come back and dance. Mr. Bojangles, call him Mr. Bojangles. Mr. Bojangles, come back and dance. Please dance and dance.
I'm going to pretend that applause was for me. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing. We're getting lots of suggestions for quote of the night, which is super. That'll be going on to a Twitter poll later. But yes, I think Annette is trying to distract us from a prize-winning quote also. Anyway, drumroll please. Next out the hat is Eve Smith. Eve Smith writes speculative fiction, mainly about the things that scare her. Her latest thriller, Off Target, is set in a near future where genetic engineering of babies has become the norm. Described by The Times as astute, well-researched and convincing, Eve's aim is to never let you sleep soundly again. So everybody please welcome Eve Smith.
Thanks so much, Vic and Simon. Thank you very much for having me. Great to be back. I am going to be reading from Off Target, which is my latest speculative thriller, a very different book to my debut, The Waiting Rooms. So this little cheery number is set in a world where genetic engineering of babies has become the norm. And my protagonist, Susan, has been trying for a baby for years. So when she finally gets pregnant on an impulsive one-night stand, from a man who is not her husband, she will do anything to keep that baby and ensure her husband doesn't find out, including the unthinkable. So I'm going to read a little bit from the very start of the book. I'm just taking my last swig when the doorbell rings. My hand freezes, glass against lip. Have they come back early? Wine sours on my tongue as the early evening sun dances leaf patterns across the room. Idiot, I swallow, as if Steve would ring his own bell. Now there's a knock. 2 knocks. Delivery. I lever myself up and squint at the security cam. A guy in a short-sleeved shirt and navy baseball cap is standing in my porch, clutching a small package. I think of those macabre leaflets in the bin, and my stomach tightens. But he looks legit. Knowing Steve, it's probably some enhanced wearable. I imagine hurling his new smartband against one of the empty squares on the wall. Then again, it could be for Zarel. I activate the mic. Just a minute. I shuffle down the hall, wiping the mascara smears under my eyes. I should fetch that box stand from the spare room and hang all the photos back up. That would show him. As I turn the latch, the thought makes me smile. The door slams in my face. I stagger back, cupping my nose. The man drops the package and barges past, his shirt straining against his chest as if it can barely contain him. I glimpse a tattoo, the length of his forearm. He scans the lounge and marches upstairs. Red petals spot the carpet. I need to run, but my legs won't move. I hear him thudding around, opening all the doors. Adrenaline surges and I rush to the smart pod, hit the button and steady my voice to give the command. Feet hurtle down the stairs. I race for the back door, but a hand grips my shoulder and spins me against the wall. Black eyes consume a sharp white face. I point at my bag on the table. Money, cards, take them. His mouth twists. There's a ferocity in those eyes. Drugs? Booze? Something else. Where is it? My phone starts to ring. Its playful chirps now obscene. I swallow. I don't know what you... He clamps my neck, stopping my breath like a valve. The abomination. Each syllable staccato. Where is it? He leans closer, crushing my arteries. Black discs spin behind my eyes. And that's when I realize he's here for Zarel. I claw at his face, scrabble at his fist, a primal strength eclipsing my fear. The choke releases as he grabs my wrists, breath and blood rush free. His arm wedges into my cheek. There's an inked black cross tapered like a dagger, 2 words underneath. Isaiah 64. Where is it? Fingers drill into my neck. The room begins to blur. I hear the ringtone again, faint like an echo. My lips make the shape of words. Don't know. Pain explodes under my ribs. Instinct commands my body to double over, but I'm pinned by the throat. Know that the Lord himself is God. It is he who has made us and not we ourselves. His lip curls back in a snarl. We are the clay and he is our potter. All of us are the work of his hand. Pricks of light detonate in my eyes. I think of that first scan, her twilight hand lifting in a wave. He squeezes harder, spit foaming his chin, hot wafts of breath and sweat. Children are begotten, not designed. We will purge the rot and restore Adam's line. Darkness swoops. I strain every nerve and muscle to hold on. I'd give my life for hers willingly, but I cannot protect her if I'm dead. Back to you, Vic.
Ooh, fantastic. Thank you so much. Can't wait to read it. Thank you. So, penultimate reader already. My goodness, where has that time gone? I've got to say, it's like we've never been away, or so it seems to me. Jack Jordan is our second to last reader. He's also the best-selling author of 5 thrillers, with his 6th, Do No Harm, set to be published on the 26th of May. After selling at auction in the UK and numerous foreign territories, Do No Harm is set to be the thriller of the summer in 2022. I don't know what year it is, Jack, 2022. It's coined as relentlessly tense by Sunday Times bestseller Leslie Cara, and chilling and perfectly paced by New York Times bestselling author Sarah Pearce. Jack lives and writes in Brighton, and we are delighted to welcome you today, Jack.
Oh, thank you so much. It was great to be back. It was really lovely to do my first panel with Noir at the Bar in 2020, so it's really good to be back. Yeah, and also great panelists as well, and really good readings. I've bought a lot already on my phone as we've been listening. So yeah, I'm going to be reading from my book, Do No Harm, and read the first chapter. So the book is about heart surgeon Dr. Anna Jones, whose child is abducted by an organised crime ring, and they give her an ultimatum. Either she kills a patient on the operating table, or she never sees her son again. So what a choice to make. So we're going to jump straight into the first chapter where we meet Dr. Anna Jones in the operating room. There is blood on my neck, a single drop, no bigger than a freckle, minuscule in the grand scheme of things. A man lies before me with cut flesh and exposed bone, black tar-stained lungs cranked apart to expose his heart. And yet for all the gore, all I can think about is that one small speck searing into me like a burn. I switch the blade from my left hand to my right and roll my wrist until I feel the satisfying crunch beneath the skin. The room is so quiet that the sound carries a faint echo, ricocheting off the cold tiled walls. Everyone in the room has their eyes on me, assessing the stillness of my hand, the glint of the scalpel beneath the bright strip lights, rosy at the tip from the man's blood. And yet, despite the scrutiny, my palms remain dry and my grip holds steady. But beneath my scrubs, my heart is pounding so fast that I can almost taste it. Peter's heart, however, is stone cold. Mr. Downing's double coronary bypass was straightforward until suddenly it wasn't. After cutting and sawing my way through the chest, I bypassed the blocked arteries using veins from his legs to return healthy blood flow back to the heart. By removing the clamp from the aorta to resume blood flow and rinsing away the cold potassium fluid injected to keep it still, Peter's heart should wake from its medically induced slumber. I stared down at his splayed chest, waiting for a twitch, a spasm, the first jolt to signify life. Nothing. Lungs off, please. Lungs off, Dr. Perk repeats. Return to bypass. Returning to bypass, Corinne calls back from the perfusionist station. I pass the scalpel to my aide and wait in the deafening silence. When the heart is finally back on bypass, I feel the tension leave the room like a hot, stale sigh. Let's give it a minute, I say, and clamp the aorta. Poor thing's probably knackered. Aren't we all, Dr. Burke quips, giving me a supportive wink over the top of his glasses. It is a thoughtful gesture, but we both know I'm on my own. Each surgery is a collaborative effort up to this point. Dr. Burke manages the medications, breathing tube and monitoring lines. Corinne controls the heart-lung machine. The surgical practitioner standing at the foot of the bed harvests the leg veins for transplantation, each specialist with their own aid. Beside me stands my own, Margot, assisting with every tool and swab. But when it comes to the heart, the responsibility is all mine. A wave of heat scores my back, prickling across my shoulder blades. Focus. I assess the chest cavity. The bypass was done well. The grafts are good with clean, airtight joins. We have given the heart time to recuperate, administered a cocktail of drugs to try and stimulate electrical activity, and run tests for metabolic abnormalities or any other complaints we might have missed. I have checked, rechecked, and tidied my work in the hope that it was due to a mistake I made and could ultimately fix. None of it worked. I glanced at the clock on the wall. We are fast approaching the end of the 4-hour window we have before damaging the heart becomes inevitable. Once past, each second ticked off the clock might as well be a nail hammering down the lid to the patient's coffin. My top lip tingles with approaching sweat. I fight the urge to dab it dry and recite the advice my mentor once gave me. Never show your nerves. If you panic, they panic. You can't bring a ship into the dock if your crew has jumped overboard. I squeeze the patient's heart in my fist, contracting and releasing in the rhythm it has followed so many times before, and gently lay it inside the chest cavity. The flesh has turned rosy pink from my grip, and in a strange way, it almost looks pretty, like a cheek flushed from the cold. Let's give it one last go, I say, the implications pulsing behind my words. I reach in slowly, prolonging the patient's life for as long as I can, and release the clamp's hold on the aorta. A river of blood flows into the heart. Still, nothing happens. I squeeze the heart repeatedly, but even with the potassium fluid flushed out, it feels strangely cold, wet and slippery like a hog's snout. Come on, Peter. My shoulders tense where I hunch over the table and put all of my strength into manually manipulating the heart. Sweat gathers upon my face. Margot slips in silently and dabs each droplet away. I'm not sure how much time has passed, a minute, 10. But when I look up from the chest cavity, glistening with perspiration and breathing heavily behind my mask, I realize that the whole team is staring at me. Their eyes are washed with pity. That is when it finally hits me. This heart won't ever beat again. Stress pains pulse behind my eyes, spasm in the knotted muscles of my shoulders. I look down at my hands, aching and trembling from seizing the heart so firmly, and release the smallest of sighs. Bypass off, please. Corinne nods once and looks away. A man will die today, and we will orchestrate it. Me with the command, her flicking the switch. Bypass off, she confirms. Lungs off, please. Lungs off, Dr. Perk replies. And then we wait. The heart-lung machine winds to a stop. The tubes clear of blood as it returns to the patient's circulatory system. And then the inevitable, the flat line of a motionless heart. The sound screams through all of us, piercing through the theatre in shrill echoes, ringing off every apparatus and stainless steel tool. I glance at the clock on the wall. Time of death, 16:53. Lovely, thank you, Vic.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And I still remember you doing your first reading with us, so it's a pleasure to have you back and have the real physical book there for you to read from as well.
Oh, thank you very much.
Wishing you well with it in May, Jack. See you soon.
Thank you.
Take care. Right, look, there's one piece of paper and she knows who it is.
She's been waiting.
This is a lovely short introduction for a lovely, I don't know if you are short, Victoria, or not, but a lovely lady. Patricia Cornwell has described Victoria Selman's first standalone thriller, Truly, Darkly, Deeply, as powerfully fresh and moving at the pace of wildfire. I finished this book last weekend and I can completely confirm Patricia is correct. Oh. So I am delighted to have you on tonight, Victoria, to read from Truly, Darkly, Deeply.
Oh, thank you. It's so lovely to be here. And after what a lovely lineup I've been listening to, so I feel very, very privileged to be joining everybody. And hello to the audience. This is my first standalone, as Vic says. It's a story I wrote during lockdown, which was homeschooling my 2 children. Multiple Murder was a welcome break from endless snack making and BBC Bite Size. And like all of my books, it very much taps into true crime and the criminal psyche. But what intrigues me as much is how serial killers are able to dupe those close to them, and that it's able to live with one without ever suspecting it. And the other thing that I thought was really interesting and was a source of inspiration for this particular book is it seemed to me that a lot's been written from the viewpoint of the serial killer's wife, in inverted commas, but very little, if anything, that I can think of has been penned from the viewpoint of a child. And I was fascinated by that, the idea of what it would be like to grow up with somebody who later turns out to be a serial killer, how it would affect you, how you would ever live with the guilt. And particularly, as in the case of my protagonist, Sophie, if you weren't actually sure if the person you'd grown up with, that you saw as a father, was really a serial killer or if a mistake had been made. So in this case, Truly Darkly Deeply opens with my protagonist, Sophie, receiving a letter from Belmouth Prison from Matty Melgren, who is a man she's loved as a father and who is dying and wants to meet. 20 years ago, he was sent down for serial murder, but as I said, questions remain as to his guilt, and these questions have destroyed Sophie and her mother. And with this letter arriving and Matty wanting to meet, it looks like she might finally get the answers she doesn't just crave, but needs to move on. But will the truth set her free or bury her deeper? So I'm going to read to you just a short extract from the beginning of the book, which is coming out in July. So this is very much a sneak peek, and it's a letter. Sophie, there's so much to tell you. I don't know where to start. The kite, maybe. It's not the beginning exactly, but I suppose it's as good a place as any. You watched it transfixed, your nose pressed up to the glass as it circled, a black shadow creeping across the lawn. Flying on the spot, you said, the way you like to dance. There are kites in Massachusetts, but you'd never seen one before. Or maybe you just didn't remember. You were so small when we moved to London. Certainly, you never expected to see one here. They get pigeons in the capital, sparrows, the occasional robin. Birds of prey, not so much. What's it doing? Your mother mused. Lost, maybe. Poor thing. It's hunting, you said, and you were right. The sparrow was hopping about in the fallen leaves on the trampoline, didn't see it coming, didn't stand a chance. The kite didn't swoop, so much as drop out of the sky, snaring its victim, pulling it apart right where you practice your tuck jumps. Your awe turned to horror, gripping you the way the kite gripped its prey. Sated, the killer returned to the clouds, leaving behind only the sparrow's legs, spat out and discarded on the muddy, leaf-strewn canvas. An avian crime scene. I think of it often, an omen for the darkness readying to descend into our lives, for the wreckage that would follow, for the incomprehensibility of it all. You cried, nose running, choking on your tears. It'll be okay, there's nothing to be afraid of, your mother told you. She lied, Sophie. You had every reason to be afraid, and it was not all going to be okay. Thank you so much for listening.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us, Victoria. Best of luck. I'm sure it'll fly. It's absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
So, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight for this kind of trip back in time for Crawley Wordfest. It's been really great to get the not so ratty or tatty hat out and host these 11 brilliant authors. It's been lovely to see the chat that's been happening and stuff. You can, of course, sign up to Bay Tales to keep up to date with our forthcoming events, both virtual and physical. I was going to say real life, as though this isn't real life. Don't forget to email us vnatb20@gmail.com with the title of the book that you'd like to win in the subject header. One book only, please, or you will be disqualified. You know I will disqualify you. The competition closes at midnight tonight, UK time. So, huge thanks to our authors, and they are A.A. Chaudhuri, Abir Mukherjee, Awais Khan, Eamon Alonge. It's the hardest memory game ever, this. Eve Smith, Jack Jordan, Neil Lancaster, Russ Thomas, S.J. Watson, Trevor Wood, and Victoria Selman. Thank you to our lovely Simon Buick for keeping all the digital plates spinning in the background, and thanks to Jason Isaacs for providing the music. Do sign up to Bay Tales at baytales.com to keep up to date. Follow us on social media. You know, whatever you want to do, that's cool. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining us tonight. It has been a true pleasure to be back. And hopefully we will see you again very, very soon.